Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar using MS Excel in the next audit, top basic and intermediate techniques. My name is Jim Kaplan. I'm founder and owner of Auditnet, and with us today is my colleague and friend Rich Lanza, an ACL and audit software expert. This webinar represents a collaboration between Auditnet and AuditSoftware.net in delivering training series focusing on audit software. There's a little bit of information about Auditnet, and the next slide should have some information about myself. There we go. And also some information about Auditnet. And I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. A little bit about myself, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of Auditnet with a background as a Chief Audit Executive, Internet for Auditors pioneer, and an auditor who believes and promotes the use of technology for audit. Before we proceed to today's material and introducing Rich Lanza, let me go through the webinar housekeeping very quickly, and I'll make this quick. Basically, we are recording today's webinar, and the webinar and its material are the property of Cash Recovery Partners, and unauthorized usage or recording of the webinar or any of the material is strictly forbidden. We are recording, as I said, and you will receive a link to that recording within 5 to 7 business days. Also, because this webinar does qualify for NASBA CPE. NASBA rules require us to ask polling questions during the webinar, and CPE certificates will be sent via email to those who answer all the polling questions. The only exception to this is those who are viewing in a group setting today. As long as you have entered your name and your email address on the attendance form, you will receive the CPE certificate as well once we receive that from the facilitator coordinator. The CPE certificates and link to the recording will be sent to the email address that you registered with in GoToWebinar. We're not responsible for delivery problems due to spam filters, attachment restrictions, or other controls in place for your client, email client. You can also ask questions during the webinar. Submit questions via the chat box on your screen, and we'll answer them either during or at the conclusion. What we usually try to do is when we break for a polling question, we'll look for the questions that have been posted, and we'll try to address them at that point in time. After the webinar is over, you will have an opportunity to provide feedback. Please complete the feedback questionnaire. And if GoToWebinar does stop working at any time, you can always relaunch the application, or you can join by phone, and you should have received all that information in the sign-up. The next screen provides you with some information about disclaimers. I'm not going to go through and read that. We've sent that to all of you who have registered today, and those who registered in a group setting. You should have received a copy of the handouts from the group coordinator. At this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Rich to introduce himself and then get into today's topic.
Great.
Rich?
And thanks again, Jim, and thanks again everyone for coming today. I have been using data analytics for over 20 years, and I'm going to try to show as much as I can as quickly as I can. We do these live, so bear with us at times. If a data file has to open up or such. What I do is I also kind of just noting I will watch the screen from to make sure that I'm kind of keeping up with the screen sometimes if it's moving ahead of or I'm moving ahead of it. But with all that said, I really try to take all this experience and books I've written and articles. It's really just research I've done to kind of think about what I'm doing and try to boil that into this course, but using Excel and a practical way. So, I can just really continue on really into the learning objectives. If you want to learn more about me, go to richlanza.com, and all that will be at the end of the course anyway. Okay, learning objectives today is essentially we're going to use Excel as an audit software. And I I'll have to look it up, 10 years ago or so, decided I had ACL, and I was pretty good at it, and I said I'd like to be able to do everything in Excel that I can do in ACL. just to see if I could do it. And it took me about a weekend. It wasn't that hard, which is, it was kind of like due to Excel, not really me, and was able to kind of write this little book, and we'll show that to you. You'll get it for free. It's very dated, but for many of you, it might actually be what software you're using. I still meet people using 2003 Excel, and sure enough, this is written in that. But with that said, it's also very compatible. A lot of the things I talk about are compatible. I'm going to be showing 2013, which may scare somebody, but I really doubt it. It's very similar to 2010, 2007, and in many ways 2003. I mean, from a code point of view of what you're doing, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. Well, obviously, we're going to talk about getting data and such, and maximizing pivot tables, using all these different approaches for sampling, which I'm going to suggest an add-in for that, graphing, of course, and at the end of it all, I like to talk about macros, so I'm going to give you a couple that are kind of neat, in my opinion. And again, try my best to show them to you. We're going to teach you a few things about macros, but I'm going to show you how you can learn more about macros. It's a really hard concept, and within 2 hours to give you like the whole landscape of Excel, I'd rather kind of show you a couple of macros that have been built and give them to you and say, hey, have fun with them, rather than go in real depth today on the secrets of macros. But we will show you how to get some good free training there as well. Okay, from an Excel point of view, I won't spend too much time on this, but this was written a fair number of years ago, 2007, and it was something I written for the New York State Society. And I was just trying to go down the road that auditors kind of owe it to themselves as sort of reasonable professionals in their profession to use data analytics more. And this is back in 2007. I mean, so we're a few years later. But with that said, it really kind of goes to this major case that was out there that talks about it. And I think that there are starting to be more of a push, even in the PCOB type writing, which I believe I'll show as a slide, and if not, I'm just saying it's part of their evidence standard. They actually talk about 100% testing, which is nice to see. So just kind of noting that it's starting to become more of the reasonable professional thing, so you might as well learn it, and it's not that scary. Once you jump in, for those that may think that data analytics is going to create a lot, kind of like a black hole on a project from a time point of view, it really shouldn't. So it should really help do a much better audit. Okay, let me kind of jump over to the free audit software tool. We're also going to talk about an active data Excel add-in product that you'll get. It's a $199 link. It's like, I think it's like $140 less than the list price, so it's like a really good discount. And let's just say John West and Jim Kaplan and Rich Lanz are all good friends, and I think in a way John wanted to make sure we got a really good rate to offer to the members of the Auditnet group. So with that said, it's a great thing, and while there are even more discounted links there, it's not really a sales thing for John's product. I mean, you can use it for 30 days for free, and you can get an audit done at least for free, and see if you like it, and if it works, and if it doesn't work, then you just throw it away. But with that said, the free white paper that I have can be downloaded at that link. I'm just going to open it up real quick here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. I want to show you the real concepts, not kind of walk through a book showing you the concepts. And with that said, I'd have let me try to scroll out a little bit so you can see that. And that might be too small, so let me try to scroll in. So what I decided to do was take all of the different types of data analytic tests. So we have kind of the good old financial ratio stuff, right? The horizontal, vertical ratios, all that. And I explain how to do each one, even if it's simple. I just said, this is how you do it. Okay, Benford's Law, regression, and Monte Carlo simulation, which, I'm going to go back to, I think. I found some interest in using that. It was and I'll try to explain it in a minute, but bear with me. I haven't used that product since 1998. So it's been a little while even for me in using Monte Carlo, but I will talk about it a little bit. With that said, all the other products or commands that you could issue, like append and cross-tabulate and duplicates and extract, these are all things that can be done obviously in ACL. Sorry, but I then showed you how to do it in that product. Of course, yes. We updated in 2006. It's not that old. Okay. With that said, just very quickly. Just wanted to show you just some examples here of, kind of ratio. This is a horizontal analysis with the formula, vertical analysis. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I give you a bunch of the ratios if that is helpful to you, that's available to you. Trending analysis, etc. Even how to do statistics, like a full statistics of and stratifications. We're going to do a lot of this today, but I'm going to show you a lot easier way of doing it, and I think that's kind of the goal here. Aging, Benford's Law, even, we're going to talk a lot about that, so just showing this to you though. Regression and Monte Carlo simulation. I'll talk about regression. What Monte Carlo did, I'll just note it, is not only are you able to kind of set regression, but you can also set like probabilities of things happening, and then it does this gaming theory, and it throws dice on how many times randomly it's going to go one way or another. It was just really amazing what it did, and did it all in Excel. I don't know if the product's still available, but it was called At Risk that allowed you to do it, and I'm going to go back to that. But just even showing you, it even kind of went into some depth, and there were some other links to Word documents and such that you could get. And then this kind of talked through all the other items as well. But again, don't want to spend too much time on that product, which is free. You can download it. You can utilize it. We also, let me just kind of then jump back into the presentation. So with that in mind, these are the types of tests that you can run with data analytics, of course, and and this was kind of all the other things that we had. I wanted to jump now to kind of the process to actually getting the data going, and I think it's more or less even just for the most part, getting a process that's efficient so that you're not wasting a lot of time going, we got to go back now and get more data and different data and such, that you're kind of thinking things through from the get-go. So, at a high level, I don't want to waste as much time here as opposed to spending more time on good old Excel. But for the most part, think about your audit objectives, what reports align to those audit objectives, using past reports to kind of model and refine what we're going to be doing going forward, if you have any sort of past reports that you could use. And then once you kind of thought through the entire report process, then ask for data, because that way you know what you want now, right? You kind of know the universe of data that you want, and you can now request it. Obviously, you want to obtain it, validate it, normalize it, validate it's a good one for the auditors out there, especially, just to make sure it's complete and accurate. And then what I do is I try my best to kind of macro things or script it. I tend to do a bit of that still in ACL. I will admit that, as opposed to Excel, the scripting part, because it's a lot easier for me. The macro code, I tend to have other people write it for me, but I can design it for them. I can tell them exactly what I want, and then they kind of do the actual behind-the-scenes stuff. And we're going to show you some of those today, which they're kind of neat. Anyway. After all that, you run your reports. So, there's so many things we could be doing prior to running reports. What a lot of people do, though, is they'll kind of get data quickly and just, jump right in. I will say, though, the one step in that process that, I think a lot of people kind of struggle with is getting data. And to kind of help that along, and we will be giving out, I don't want to say every file today, because there may be a couple I say or, I can't give out, but for the most part, every file today, will be given to you. And this be one, being one of them. So the ones that we're using today that you see, this is a Word document. It's a data request that I have for accounts payable. It could be a data request for general ledger or inventory or what have you. I think it has the framework, and I think that's kind of where I'm going with that. And So with that said, what we did here is, let me kind of scroll into that a little bit better so you could see it. It might be a little more fair to you. Okay, so what I have here is the tables that we need, the invoice header, distribution, and master file. The distribution is basically taking the invoice header and breaking it out into a distribution of where it goes in the general ledger. The vendor master file is obviously just, name, address, stuff like that. So in the invoice header, there are a variety of fields that I like to get, and this was based on all the reports that I wanted to run. And I have to say it's a pretty good list. I mean, for what it's worth. Obviously, we put in the time frame there. We have some notes, and I'm not going to go into this in absolute depth because I don't want to, waste your time completely with it. But I do think it's a great tool if you don't have one to get vendor master file data. You might want to include in the accounts payable one the employee master file. It normally goes through payroll, and it's like a separate one. But I'm just telling you, it's a great one to get if you're there. Okay, so then I talk about data formats, data structure, meaning when you give us the data, Mr. IT person, can you explain where things start and end in the data? Can you explain the numeric value? Is it a date value? How is it kind of formatted? And then I always ask for some sort of, data verification stuff. And I always ask for this, if you could please give us like a sample invoice copy. That's kind of the key thing. And also kind of totals of reports and such. The data delivery, I also kind of note that. And then even for payables, I try to come up with a variety of questions that would help me code the data a little bit better. So, kind of coding invoices, are adjustments, partial payments, void payments, how can that be structured as well? So, okay, with that, I wanted to, definitely talk about data requesting, and again, validation, a huge one, so I wanted to also spend some time on that one. I came up with a few questions that I generally ask when I'm doing my accounts payable import, and they're just, basic validation questions that you can kind of rely on. Do we have all the fields? Is there one supplier record in the master file? Otherwise, it creates sometimes a kind of duplication effect. Is there one invoice record per the invoice file? Again, you get all these duplicate invoices, but they're not really, they're false positives. Do the values make sense, etc. I don't, you can kind of read them and go through them on your own. I'm trying to kind of give you a lot of information today, and hopefully you'll be able to go back to this stuff. And with that said, as we are going through this, and I skip over points, I just want to note, you will be able to view the video of this for 3 months after the event. So, you can go back and you will have the data files. So what a lot of people do is we'll kind of like run it on an iPad while they're essentially, doing the actual work on their laptop. And, that will work, and we'll show you how to do that through some links we'll send you at the end. So in a lot of ways, I feel today is a good way of viewing everything, and then knowing that you can go back and utilize the files themselves or yourselves to get the proper results. So at this point, we wanted to go to our first polling question. This is for NASBA compliance. It's sort of, we're just making sure you're here today, and so I'm launching this polling question. What comes first in the data extraction process? Is it requesting data, setting objectives for the audit, setting report objectives, or validating data? So, do you just ask for data first, figure out your objectives for the audit, set report objectives for validate? And while that's going, I have to admit I have not been checking questions. I have checked my chat, so Jim usually Jim will tell me if 50 questions have showed up and I need to respond to them, which is good. But with that said, I'll just take a look here. Yep, okay, great. Okay, so far questions are more administrative in nature. If this is a great time to post questions. If you want to kind of cast your vote and then jump to a question. We are right now at 95% voted. If the last remaining, I try to keep it open for about 90 seconds, just to let you know, and so as not to waste too much time, but to give everyone a chance. And for CP purposes, we do need you to click on this. I will continue to look at my questions. I don't see any coming up. So I'm going to just close and share, and bear with me. It sort of closes my audience view here. Sorry about that. And the second option, setting objectives for the audit, was 87%, and that's exactly right. I mean, it's really kind of figuring out the basics, starting with the basics, and then kind of working from there. So let me hide that. Get back to our slide deck here. Okay. What I was going to say right now was I was going to jump into pivot tables and let you know that there are a variety of slides here that I may or may not go through, but I think I may not go through as well, because we are going to talk about each one of these concepts. So I will make sure to kind of touch on these concepts probably even a couple of times. And what I'm going to do is first off take the basics of kind of graphing some data, and what I even thought we would do, just to kind of get the basics down, and without really showing anyone's name and address, I sort of highlighted or hid all of that information. We can still use it as a pivot table, and what I wanted to kind of show you today, again focusing more on counts for this particular purpose, and setting up a graph and doing some of the numerical changes. I will kind of start off by saying that when we look at the pivot table concept, I was always very afraid of pivot tables, and I will even say through probably 2007 even, or something, when I wrote that paper on Excel, I still hadn't really mastered them. There are some really good books out there. There is some free training videos that you can take a look at, and we even have a full course coming up on this, just on pivot tables. But today I will be using pivot tables a decent amount, and the reason for that is because they're so powerful and they really do a lot of things. So as we kind of dove into this, I wanted to kind of take some of the answers that came back, and I really haven't looked at this, so I'm more or less kind of looking at this a little bit blind, but I'm not going to reveal anyone's name or address or anything like that. Okay, so what I've done here is at a high level, and bear with me, I just want to take a look at your screen yet, so you can't even see anything. Let me scroll into that. What I tried to do is create a little pivot table that says, what software do you use, which is kind of down the left-hand side, and what software do you rely on for fraud data analytics? Excuse me, that was that question. Then we said, do you run a dedicated set of analytics to detect fraud? And there were a lot of blanks, I believe, and then less than 20% of the time, 21 to 50, etc. So it's kind of like a mapping of like what product to who's using it for in a more of a dedicated fashion. So I then graphed that, and I'm going to show you how to do this. Don't worry. I just wanted to kind of get to some answer with you first, so that we could get that out of the way. But in looking at this, the over 75% is the dark blue. And you see, maybe regardless, they didn't answer the product question, which is fine. But there are a couple, a few people in this sort of other product category, and then the Excel or add-in type of a product like Active Data is a value here as well. And I can make an attempt here, adding some data labels, and I think I can even do it to the entire series. If I can click on things properly here. But for right now, let me so in adding the data labels, as I'm doing so for each one, I know there's a better way, but I'll just kind of go like this for now, is just kind of giving you an idea of, sort of how many people are voting in each one. Now, in the pivot chart, you can go to pivot chart tools, and what's really nice about pivot chart tools is it does allow you an ability to kind of change quite a bit. And the point of this one is that if I'm in a pivot table here, there's pivot table tools, right? And you can click on that, and it gives you a lot of, again, great options, quite frankly. But in the pivot chart tools, many of which, are quite the same, but also from a design perspective, you're able to change quite a bit, such as the chart type, switching rows to columns. I mean, I'll give that a try. Does that make it any better? Less than 20% of the time. Okay, yeah, maybe this is even a little bit better. I just went from like columns to rows to rows to columns, and then from a format point of view, just kind of curious what's allowed sort of here. But it's a lot of kind of changing how things look, and I'm not going to spend as much time on that, quite frankly, today. But for the most part, we could think about adding data labels like we were showing here, say inside the base, inside end. There's all these things. I don't know, centering is probably good enough. What's really interesting is when you think about like dedicated analytics, right now, when we're kind of looking at things, let me change it back to that other one where we had the blue here, and let me just kind of add chart element. Again, you could add like everything from this one thing. The ribbon, I'm sure for a lot of people, gave them a lot of problems, but I think, over time you just find it to be just a great tool set. With all that said, the dark blue, notice there's only, about 3 respondees out of everybody, that are kind of using it over 50% of the, 75% of the time. The yellow being the 51 to 75% of the time, being within Excel, for that one category. The 21 to 50% of the time, again, there's mostly in Excel. There's one, actually, there was one in ACL, but you can kind of see, I mean, it just seems to be either blank or quite a low percentage of dedicated kind of analytic tests being run across the board, which is interesting, and hopefully the course will help that. And let me kind of go back now though to what we did to get here, and to build this pivot table, what you can do is highlight. You go to Insert Pivot Table. And this is in the slides as well. You then highlight that data range, and it created a pivot table. Now, let me just move my GoToWebinar item here. Sorry about this, folks. And bear with me. Okay, great. And hopefully, sorry, I just needed to move something around on the screen that you can't see, but just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, if I now click anywhere in the pivot table, what that does for me is it brings up the pivot table fields that are kind of over here. I'm just going to drag that back. And what I can then do is kind of highlight, let's say, even to say, what is the number of employees, within your company, just to kind of take that perspective. And sorry, I then clicked and dragged this again down to the values section, and didn't need to do it twice, but I'll leave it in there, and we'll kind of show you why in a second. So what we will do here, let me just let me kind of get the pivot table the way we want it, and then we'll kind of edit the columns and such. And let me do, maybe percentage of column total just for right now. So what I'm trying to do just quickly here is just to highlight and show you kind of a final analysis, right, where we have, what is the number of employees focused, even part-time, on fraud data analytics, and just kind of giving you that perspective from a percentage point of view, and from a company's point of view, where that's kind of falling out. And there's a way to kind of change that, if you will, and kind of, but we can kind of change how this is kind of set up by company, but to kind of switch rows to columns and such. But without doing that, let me just kind of show you a more simpler concept, which is just going now into each one of these values and and the variety of options here. I mean, it's amazing. Okay, for example, let me kind of drag down again that number of employees. And I mean, I don't know if that's really going to help us. I think it probably won't actually, because that one's probably, let me take that out. Sorry about that. Or, oh, my Excel seemed to had an issue with that. So just give me 1 second here. All right. And I do apologize. I just wanted to boot out of Excel for a second. I was taking a risk there because I was using the Excel registration, kind of data file, I think what I'm going to do is kind of go to a safer data file, which is the one I normally use. But I did want to show you the concept of how easy pivot tables can be, and utilizing that in the session today. And I apologize that I think selecting that max surely gave it a bit of I guess a spin. So let me kind of open up here another data set, which is just a accounts payable data set. And I wanted to go to this one anyway at some point because it had dates in it. And I wanted to be able to kind of change the dates in what we were kind of working on. And let me kind of jump to, in taking this payables data, what I'd like to do at this point is insert another pivot table of just the payables data. This is kind of the first step, insert pivot table. And a lot of options, but I'm going to select the invoice date. Now, it's kind of odd. It came up with the month. So, there definitely is some either grouping going on or something like that. So, we got to kind of take a look at the field settings for that, which is a little strange. But with that said, as far as I can see here, here's the invoice date. And at least here, when I've converted it here, which it seemed to work here, that invoice date came in with a different setup where it had quarters and years, and then the actual kind of month itself being seen. So what I should be able to do is, in taking the pivot table tools, I should be able to ungroup that selection. And it was a little strange how it came up like that, but it's also a great thing because it's a way of teaching that to you. I can, again, drag that invoice date down here, and it'll normally put a count. Then I can click on that drop-down and select value field settings, so I can change a variety of things. I'm a little bit afraid now to change a couple of them, but let me stick with count for right now. And what that's kind of showing us is within the payables, how many times we had items within that particular category. Now, from a sum perspective, we might want to take some other information like the invoice amount and drop it in there, and that automatically kind of figured out to do sum, which is really good. But we could also do the average of the invoice amount, and that gives us an ability, when there's one invoice, well, the average is about the same. But let me drag that in there again, right? So now we have the sum, the total, and then the average. Total, average. And let me continue with invoice amount. You can also kind of set things like a maximum and a minimum as well in here. And without, doing every option imaginable, just want to give you enough options that you can kind of see where we're headed here. But what this does is kind of give you even things like what's known as a range, which is the maximum minus the minimum for any sort of amount field, and that's quite useful. But okay, for right now, I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff, and I'm just going to say I only care about the count of invoices by invoice date, etc. Let me pivot chart that by going to Pivot Table Tools, Pivot Chart, and that creates a line graph that I can follow. And that line graph essentially it can be set up in a variety of ways. I'm gonna click on line in this case. I can look at a couple of options. But I'm going to keep it simple and go back to the original option. Then I'll go to Move Chart and click on that. And we now have a line graph by day. And I will tell you, of all the tests I run, I will say the vendor to employee master kind of matching test is probably one of the best for fraud if you're looking for that. And I just think for errors and fraud, taking a look at the daily processing by volume and by value is a really interesting thing. And I have to say I found a variety of frauds in general ledger, in payables, that centered around a day that just looked totally out of whack with everything around it. And another thing that you can do with days pretty quickly, and I'm pretty sure I do it in my data, is I can use a function, and that function being kind of the day of week. But before we go there, let me kind of jump to our next polling question, because we're kind of up to that time. And that polling question is, let me just bear with me, I just need to read it on the screen here for myself, is where do you change the value formats in a pivot table? Is it grouping, value field settings, pivot chart, or active field format? So kind of where do you change the value formats from sum to count and things of that nature? While that poll is going, I do appreciate you clicking as soon as you can, and that way we can move on as soon as we can. I try to get to 100% if we can, but I find generally we're at about like 98%. And I guess if you don't care about CPE, it doesn't matter. But I don't know. You may as well. It helps us know that we're done, I suppose, if you don't mind. Okay. With that said. Yeah, hopefully, I'll try to do better on the screen. I know I probably bounced around a little bit because that file had a problem, and I had to close it and close Excel in a very bad way. So I'm glad we're still on the phone, quite frankly, with the way Excel stopped. And it was really just because I tried to use our registration data today just to kind of show you, who's here today and what some data using pivot tables. But it kind of backfired on me. I normally use this data file, and this is the data file I will send you. I won't be sending you the registration data. So is there a way to default the value field settings to sum versus count, and also default the format of the sum number? I almost want to, I have to say, I probably need to ask that question myself of someone and get back to you. I think it's a great question. To be honest with you, I am always annoyed by that, where, it seems to have a mind of its own on how it works. If anything, and I have not played with this enough to say, there are things like field settings, which I guess we could look and see, there is automatic, custom, select one or more, and, I guess you could have that. And then in the layout it prints, again, I will bring back the screen in a second, and I will talk to that. But there, let me kind of close this poll and share the screen. You're absolutely right. It's value field settings, and we had a question on value field settings. So let me kind of jump in there. Is there a way of default setting it? If you're in your pivot table, you can go to Pivot Table Tools, and you could select field settings or options, and it looks like in the field settings you do have some options here to kind of number format things and such. So I think there probably are some ways to kind of custom set it actually, and it's that field settings. I have not done it though, so I have to admit that. I normally go to options though, and I will admit in the display I normally select Classic because it's just me. There is this new format that they have, which will come up in today's session somewhere, I'm sure. But it is kind of it is difficult to look at times, and I prefer the older kind of version myself. It just seems to be more natural. Okay, I think we've answered all the questions so far. Hopefully. I continue to just kind of go back and make sure that my screen is viewable. I will try to not bounce around too much going forward with the files. And what I wanted to do though, we talked about changing the number of formats, grouping things. Let me just kind of show you the grouping though. It seemed as though the grouping wasn't working exactly as I intended. And what I will do, bear with me here, is to group an item. You just want to select the invoice date, the pivot table. You can select pivot table tools, and select group selection. And in that group selection, you then have the option of things like months and quarters and years. And let's do year, I'm going to do year, quarter, month, like that. So what this gives you an ability to have is a very quick kind of analysis by the quarter and month. And if you pivot chart this, yeah, that's a pretty good one actually. So now I can kind of take this and I usually move things to its own chart, just probably because of my eyes more than anything else, just easier to see. But this is kind of a neat graph as well. I mean, and useful in analyzing data, especially by quarter and looking for trends. And people are surprised by the most simple of trends, quite frankly, at times. Okay, so for the most part, I think we've gone through the kind of the basics of pivot tabling, and what I wanted to do is kind of show you an advanced technique, but again, maybe make it a little bit more of something that you can kind of utilize on your own, because it is something a little bit more advanced and something to type in, but it is really useful. Bear with me. And I'm just trying to bring up here the slide deck that we have. Let me just kind of pin that over there. Great. Okay. Perfect. So in essence, a lot of times there are pivot tables that are set up where there's a named range, and that named range can be set in this case to what you're looking at here. And again, I can give a try to kind of setting this up and doing it as quickly as I can, but I just want to kind of show it to you quickly because it is a little more advanced. But let me explain to you, what does capturing all the data in a pivot table mean? Well, let's copy this and go over to payables data. I'm actually kind of curious. I wonder if I had already set it up, so that's good. But imagine we're setting it up from scratch, and you would have to select the new. Sorry, you would go to formulas. You would go to the data that you're in. You would go to You'd go to formulas, and then based on the formulas that you're setting, you would go to name manager. And in name manager, you'd select new. And in this case, you could, I suppose, call it anything you'd like, but we'll call it new. And I think you can't have any spaces, so it's like new pivot. I'm using underscore test. And we're going to have the scope of the workbook right now, but I'm going to highlight this section right here, and I'm hoping it's called payables data. See, mine was called pivot data, which may, no, this may work. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the tab and I'm putting that right in there. this may or may not work. Let's see here. Yep. So, yeah, okay, you get the concept. The problem is sometimes typing in here is a little bit rough. So just so as I'm not wasting time, what I can do is now edit the one that we had, and this is the right one, right? So it has payables data, et cetera, et cetera. All I did was I copied, again, just to keep it simple. You don't have to like even think on this one. All you have to do is change the name from pivot data to payables data, and utilize this exact function that's being provided to you. And what that'll do is create a pivot table based on this pivot range. What you can then do, and let me just go back to the actual name manager. I gotta get the right name. Sorry, is it pivot_range? Okay. So what I can do is in my insert pivot table, I can now enter pivot_range, and that's a named range within Excel. So it just knows where like the X and Y coordinates are. Okay. And it's saying data source reference is not valid, which is not fun. But bear with me 1 minute. I think I can fix this one. It was called pivot range test, and this is one that I believe I put in there, but maybe nope. Looks like actually this is when I called it. So pivot range test is what I called it last time. I'm very repetitive, as you could tell. So what we'll do is we'll try that one more time, actually with the right name now. And what that does is it dynamically sets up a range. So unfortunately, if you set up a pivot table and it only went out to column K in the data in the pivot table that you set, it would fix itself to K. If you started putting things in things like L, such as days payable outstanding, is one option here, and put some values in here. Even if we just put 30, for everybody going down the list here. Now, if I go over to the pivot table that I've just created, and obviously take a look here, it's not there yet, right? But if I right-click data, I've never done it with data not here. It's kind of interesting actually, and click refresh. Notice the DPO shows up now, so it's dynamic. So whatever you throw into this spreadsheet, it's going to, excuse me, this one, it will now basically throw a result for you. So, okay, I did want to show that to you, and note it's in the slide. And again, hopefully you can use my video and all my wonderful mistakes so we can go back over and over again to finally get it right, but to kind of learn what we did today. And what I find is this function is something just better to be memorized as opposed to something to be understood. And I work a lot with Bill Jellin and Tracy over at Mr. Excel, and we'll show you some of the macros a little bit later today that they have for us. And for the most part, I kind of rely on Tracy on this one, so it works quite well. Okay, so just going back one step, I'm going to go now to stratifying data, and I kind of felt like let me do that pivot table one first before I kind of give you a few more examples here. I want to talk to you about adding more codes to your data, and what I find is the more you can codify your data for what value range it is. Here's a real key one, and I can't really do it today, but I can tell you is how about stratifying your data based on the income effect of that item? If it's a general ledger item, how is the income effect of that? That has a much a much higher value to it than even the balance sheet effect or anything else. But just from a stratification point of view, let me kind of show you what we did here. Now sorry, I show it to you this way. Let me just make sure here. Yeah. So this is the terrible way of doing it, but this is the way that you do it in the using Excel as an audit software. That PDF document that I'm giving you. So this is like the old school way of doing it. I worked with well, we did a webinar once, and so what we had come up with in that webinar is to, bear with me one second here, is to kind of create a stratification. And the stratification was something that I worked on with Charlie Walker at Top Cats. And in that way, let us kind of take a look at this. So by stratifying data, by noting what value it is by using the if statement, or this other way that I'm going to show you in a minute here, is you can basically set up a way of understanding where your data is, but then by charting it, I find you can even get a much better perspective from a colorization point of view of where you should focus your time. And kind of going to this, I don't know if I can change this or not, but I would imagine, yes, switching the rows and columns would really make that a different graph, right? So here's a great example, just got to throw it out there as I saw it, of this is like not so good of a graph, like it's kind of hard to understand, where this one's a lot easier, to understand. It's like, okay, these are the months, and where are items over 1,000, and you can kind of see that April month going up. Maybe we paid taxes that month, I don't know, and then May also high, and then obviously August and September. But you can kind of see the trends a lot better than surely that one. Okay, so stratification, though, I think is useful because it kind of puts things into buckets, as opposed to just like we group things from a date perspective. It's another way of coding data. The more you can add types to the data, I find that really the better the analytics end up being ultimately. Okay, so I think I'm going to close this one. Bear with me just one second here. Yep, I think I'm actually going to close this unless I'm missing something. Yep, so I'm just going to open up another example spreadsheet. Sure. See if I can try my luck here. So this is utilizing the if statement, and I think, I'm going to be honest, in the interest of time, I think I'd like to move on and note to you that what I will show you is a video. We're going to get you a video clip, and I'm going to do this with the macros as well, where I kind of send you directly to a few video clips where you can actually learn more on a better way of doing the stratification. And what it uses is a VLOOKUP command and setting a limit. But again, in the interest of time, I'd rather kind of keep you with the if statement, which is not as good, but at least you have it in the data and you have it in the slides, and is more of a very complex if statement. But then what we'll do is kind of get you the video that Charlie Walker had, and I will put that into the data files that we're going to be sending as well. And I'm doing this purposely because I want, hopefully, to kind of direct you to additional learning content that we can't get to today, but does kind of offshoot. And what I will note here is in the actual email that we send, we'll kind of create a little, these were some of the things that we suggest you kind of keep going to read. I will tie that back to this particular slide as well, so you kind of know your place in line, if you will. Okay, but with that said, let me kind of jump over to our next polling question. So what function, if you remembered it, was used to, kind of grab everything in that pivot table? Was it the min, the over, the more, or the offset? Okay. And I'm just trying to look at the questions while everyone's voting here. We're still pretty early on in the voting there. You know, one question that came in, will the pivot data formula auto-update the numbers in the pivot table? And the answer is no, usually, meaning what you have to do is you generally have to refresh the pivot table, and I'll try to remember that when we come back, and I'll show you how to refresh. I'm sure we're going to do it naturally in the course of today as well, but yeah, I will definitely show that as well. Okay, I think we've had this open enough. I'm going to close the poll, questions over, and share the poll and offset. 72% of you got it. You're correct. I'm going to hide that, and we should be back to my screen. And I'm just bear with me as I clean up my screen a little bit here. And again, you know, really, you know, using today's course as a way of jumping right into the various ways of actually doing this stuff, as opposed to having too much theory around, you know, why it's important and all that stuff. I am saying, you know, I have kind of one slide here when I talk about specific accounts payable testing, just kind of from a high level. What I try to do whenever I'm looking at data is I like to ask specific questions, and those specific questions, specific questions that are there, excuse me, basically the who, what, when, where, and why are part of like a journalistic set of questions that are asked. And you normally ask like very direct questions, you know, who are people that do not have access to the system? What account did we post to? When did we post it? You know, where in the organization did it, you know, get coded to, etc. So, you know, these are all the who, what, when, where, why. From a reporting point of view, I think there are reports that you run from a direct control perspective, where you're testing that the duplicate control is working in the system, for example. And then I think there's control circumvention, where you're trying to get around a control through like approval limits, you know, maybe posting a lot of items underneath. Anyway, this is kind of the theory, gives you a lot of concepts in one. What I'm trying to get across here is think about all these perspectives when you look at your data. Think about both asking specific questions, but also very general questions like, let's just summarize the data by who and by what and when, and look at it from a direct control and a control circumvention perspective. These are some specific tests I want to show you. I think we kind of did a couple, so I think, you know, I'll skip over those. But a bunch of them I do want to show you as well. And quite frankly, good old pivot tables kind of come to the rescue in a lot of ways in looking at the actual data as well. So what I'm going to do is jump over into Excel. And I'm just curious, just to change it up, do we, and I don't think I have, yeah, I don't have date, so, well, you know, this general ledger data does have, you know, kind of a round, not round test. Let me kind of copy that code, if you will, over here, and, oh darn, but that's okay. Let's kind of keep that in check. What I wanted to show here is calculating round dollar amounts. That seems to be kind of an interesting thing to folks. And this formula, which again will be in the data that we're sending you, I think is a very useful formula. It uses the if and the and function. And the reason it has to do that is because of this mod function that we have. And the mod function is what kind of divides things by the divisor that you set. And in my case, I set it to $100 was my divisor. And based on that, it will then kind of calculate whether or not it is round or not. Okay, so with that said, let me kind of show you how does this work. First off, what I do is I take the mod function and I go to the credit amount and I take a comma and I put in 100 in this case. Just kind of do that, that's all. And that gives you $58.32. Well, what it did was it divided 158.32 by 100 and said, what's the remainder? You know, if you remember kind of remainder. So what I'll do is I will copy that down. If I do a copy and I double click and there's data here already, it will kind of copy that all the way down, which is useful. And again, dividing by 100 goes in 10 times. What's the remainder? This one goes in 20 times. And what's the remainder? You know, and so on and so forth. But notice how the zeros also throw 0. So let me just change the 2078 to 2000. Notice how the divisor or the remainder, the mod, is a 0. Now it says it's round, which is good, but notice how that 0 is not round, even though it throws a 0 result in the mod function over here. So why is that? You know, and I guess the mod function, when it has a 0, you know, it is essentially it divides it, I suppose, by the 100 and gets back to that 0. So with that said, the AND function, which I'm going to attempt opening up here, let's see how this works. Yeah. So what this did is, this is kind of an interesting, you know, way of looking at it. And all I did to get here, by the way, is click on it and click on that function bar. And by doing so, you have an AND mod, just like we did, equals 0, comma, does not equal 0. So we basically, you know, it's something where it has to not equal 0 and be round, you know, at the same time. And if so, then it gets that value of the test. So just trying to show you kind of if and I will tell you that the Adobe document that I'm sending, even though it's a little dated, it uses a lot of if and you know, sometimes you kind of need it. So it is a useful thing to continue using. And hopefully this helps you on the mod function as well in understanding, you know, how to kind of calculate the round and not round. Once you do so, this is a way of calculating, say, round and not round amounts, but what if you wanted to kind of calculate round and not round journal entries? So that you know, might be more interesting, quite frankly. So what you could do is pivot table the data. You know, this is one way of doing it. And let me just bear with me here. And you would then summarize on the journal entry number, which hopefully, yep, so it goes down in the row label. And, you know, in this particular case, we'll take the debits in the value. Oops, sorry. Debits, credits. And I will then, you know, this is the best way I know how to do it. It's Control Shift and then the number 8 key. You know, so you basically highlight everything and you can copy that. I can go to another sheet of data with that. And I don't, you know, the only thing I would say is when you paste it, I generally paste with values at that point. So paste values. And by doing so, that, you know, provides a you know, a much kind of cleaner set. And what you could then do is, I guess, the mod function, but also, I mean, hey, while I'm here, you might as well do kind of, you know, equal 158 minus 158 just to make sure there's a 0 on all those. But I just wanted to note here that most people like to calculate their round dollars, if you will, sometimes at the detail level, but I find for journal entries especially, which is the data we were playing with, I like to summarize it first by journal entry, copy and paste it, and then do my mod test, which we talked about. And we'll kind of leave that one, you know, for now, just in the interest of time, because I think everyone kind of gets that concept. Okay. I am then going to go back. Let me actually try this data for a second, because we will be talking about graphing coming up in really just a second here. After which, but yeah, I don't know if I have the best data here. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is go back to the old faithful payable sample pivot, and a couple of things that I wanted to kind of continue to show you as we look at things is the variety of different techniques and playing around with numbers as well as days of week and dates and such. And what I can do is we'll good old insert pivot table. I believe I could write in the pivot range test. I think that's going to work. Okay, yeah, so I'm just checking, but that works. And kind of for the most part, what I'd like to do is take a look at this day of week function down here, and what is that day of week function? It's actually called the weekday function. So we're going to take a look at that and scroll into that real quickly here. This is the day of week or weekday function. It actually, we're taking a look here at when things were, or when the check was run. So I wonder if I have a shot if I make this equal to weekday of F2 instead of E2, which would be the enter date. It of course comes back with a problem because I'm in 2013 and my wonderful thing's having a little bit of trouble with compatibility. So let me just kind of keep that for the way it is right now as a weekday and set to 6 as opposed to changing it to the enter date. We'll kind of go off the check date, which is fine. I then pivot tabled that, and what is that telling us? Well, that's basically telling us this is Monday, number 2, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then when you take a look at 1 and 7, that would be basically Sunday and Saturday. Saturday is number 7. Okay, in taking a look at the day of week, what I like to do is to kind of take a look at transactions that are processed by day of week. And okay, so this is kind of interesting. Let's take a look at this for a second. And I can pivot chart this just like we've done, and gosh, there's probably a few different ways that we could do this. I'm going to hold off actually on charting it just yet, and this is where what I was kind of hoping to do was throw the enter date into the columns and see if there's enough. And of course, it says we're kind of going past the limit, but I'm going to try to throw in there as many as I can for right now, and then in clicking it, I'm going to kind of group that down to the quarter. And my reason of doing this is it's kind of interesting. It actually went down to the quarter and the month, which is fine. But what I find interesting is that on average, people or companies do tend to kind of work. Bear with me one second here. And we'll just do this percentage of the column total. There is a bit of kind of work level per month, but also kind of looking at averages. And it should kind of level out, but it is kind of interesting to show how Mondays are so light. And I didn't try to do this. And it looks like Fridays tend to be kind of like a catch-up day or something like that, no matter what month you go to. But some months are even worse than others. Like 50% of the month is being processed on a Friday. That's a little scary, when you think about it. Anyway, I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but I did want to show you the weekday function and also taking a look over time of something like that, like taking a code field like that and then showing it over time by percentage to again, now graph this, which for sure is what we should do. But I probably would take something of that nature, see if that worked. I don't know if it will, and see if that makes it a little bit easier to understand. But anyway, I think everyone gets the concept, and I wanted to kind of look at more kind of percentages over time, as opposed to anything else. But anyway, this gives you kind of an interesting, processing by day of week, depending on the month. And if you really want to, I suppose you could look for certain months that are just massively different than others. What I find really interesting is that it is pretty consistent, but Friday is just a crazy day. Okay, so continuing on with some of the graphing aspects of Excel, I'm going to go over to now our scatter graph. And scatter graph is something I wrote an article on for the Certified Fraud Examiners a long time back, and I really like this concept. I feel it can be used, I'm showing it to you in a payables manner, but I believe it can be used in lots of different ways. So, I don't want to, just say that you should be just using it in the kind of in the payables fashion. With that said, what we're looking at are kind of differences over time with a particular supplier. So let me just see if I can get a better a better analysis here. So this is generally a lot of times when you get supplier data from somebody, you'll have kind of the supplier number, the amount for year one, year two, the count for year one and year two, and by using this, you can kind of calculate differences. So we'll head over to that spreadsheet. And sorry about that. And that is the scatter data one. And what I did here was I tried to do my best to kind of take the difference of, say, the amounts from year one and year two, and also the counts from year one and year two. So, the goal being, if, year two, I guess in this case, would be you'd want to go kind of year two minus year one, and calculate a count difference as well. Now, there's a few different ways of graphing it, but I really found the scatter graph where you really were just kind of, I'm just going to show you how I did it. We more or less just kind of scatter graph these two columns of data, and we, in essence, just go over to the charts. So we go Insert Charts, and we can select any one of these. I just pick kind of a simple chatter, let me just move that over to its own. So that's the scatter graph. And again, it should be pretty similar. That it's a different scale that we were looking at there, but this is kind of giving you a new perspective of your data. Now, unfortunately, you can't really do it for this graph, so we'll take a look in a second. But I do want to kind of show a logarithmic effect as well, because I think that can be useful in your Axis to really kind of highlight data, a lot cleaner. But with that said, I mean, this is kind of showing you the differences between year one and year two in the amount and the volume of transactions with a given vendor. And so some vendors had, let's say, 1,800, more transactions and $60 million more of activity, and they were being posted, way out here. It almost throws the whole curve. So what a lot of times, what I'll tend to do in kind of taking that data is, with me 1 minute here. Sorry, the schedule. Oops. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but if I end up kind of highlighting these fields and going to a filter, particular mode, you can start filtering out things that just may be a little bit too off. Like they're sort of the what do you call them, the outside edges, if you will. I don't even know if 15 million is an outside edge, but I'm just going to kind of take it out for now. Just to kind of show you, we get to kind of like a 15 million. And by filtering, by just kind of highlighting those fields and going data filter and creating that filter, whoops, well, the scatter difference definitely changes. But this one changes too. And notice how the graph now really opens up. I mean, you almost kind of see within that section of the graph that used to be kind of really small as we go back to, whoops, the scatter data itself. And if I kind of right-click this, I can clear the filter from that invoice amount, go back to my scatter graph, and again, it's not as useful, I think. So let me, whoops. So with that said, I wanted to kind of show you the scatter graph and also note, where do kind of things go wrong in a scatter graph. For the most part, you kind of look at the ones as areas where there's a lot of high dollar change and low counts. The twos that are changes that just make sense. There's just higher activity and lower activity. There's changes that don't make sense, which is kind of the number 3 category. I have more activity, but I have less value. So it doesn't make sense. Or I have less activity and I have more value going to a particular vendor. That's even more concerning. That the bottom right category when you think about it. Anyway, these are kind of just some helpful hints as you're looking at the scatter graph, and something that I think is quite useful. Okay. So, let me just kind of jump across some of these other graphs just to see if there's anything I could, tell you that might be interesting. For the most part, let me just kind of take this volume and value here. There are a few different options, and one of the things that you could do is in your scatter kind of graphing. Let me kind of just select hopefully all the blue here. Let me go back to my chart tools and kind of select data, if you will. And that again, I keep going back to the ribbon and maybe trying to hopefully direct you that way as well. That hopefully that will kind of work for you as well, to find what you need to find when you need to find it. But if you select the select data category, you'll notice here we have an amount 1 and an amount 2, and if you edit the amount 1, you'll notice that is kind of bringing us back over to column B, which is the amount, basically this amount 1 column, and then column C, which is the volume in, year 1. So then we hit OK. So we have year 1 and year 2. Now this down here is a mess. I mean, it's really hard to look at. We hopefully remember we had like that $60 million or $58 million charge from, so it is kind of showing up in the data here as well. But to make this graph a little bit kind of easier to work with, one of the things that I would suggest is kind of highlighting the value columns. I think you can keep it in there, but kind of reducing them down to kind of a little bit of an essence. And what I'll kind of also do, just to make it a little bit hopefully simpler to read, is now that we kind of have it set up here, what I'll try to do is format the axis and go to a logarithmic axis. And whenever you can do this, especially in a scatter graph scenario, I think it's useful. Now, it kind of gives you a much more a different aspect or view. Now, there are a couple of like 0 and kind of close or -1 or maybe a little bit under that's showing up, and that's throwing the data a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, for the majority of it, it's fine. And what this is doing is kind of a power of 10. And kind of giving you an idea of where things show up, based on that power of 10. But again, let me go back and let me filter out again. And let's use this filter, right, and kind of think about what else that you could look at. But there are a variety of other ways that you can kind of test for what you're going for. I'm going to kind of select all again, and kind of go back to that scatter value volume. You see a few more things kind of showing up here, but it really kind of normalizes the data. So if you notice here, like that's kind of the after effect, if you will. But if I get rid of a lot of these large items here, I think it tends to pretty much be about the same in the log. That's at least my. Yeah, it tends to be a bit about the same. So it really doesn't, in a lot of ways. Oh wait, and I apologize. I think this is based on different data, and I will admit my mistake here. I believe this is based on the B column, which is over here. But again, I think that really and that filter won't work. So what I need to do is filter on this guy over here to really get some effect. So let me filter on that. and kind of see, you know, where, yep, so some of these like large things that are throwing everything, let's get rid of those. There we go. And go back to the value volume. And once again, I mean, it really, I have to say, it seems to kind of not change things as much as you'd think, maybe because I have it in year 2 still. So, you know, again, one of the things you could do in kind of playing around with your data, I'm just giving you a lot of options here, is we could get rid of and remove that actual function there. And now we're just kind of dealing with section 1, and yeah, it was about like 10 or 14 million or so. And what we're again just kind of showing is value here and volume there. Again, there were a few volume people that really threw this, and again, by kind of changing around the filtering, oops, sorry folks. Okay, by changing around the filtering and getting rid of some of these kind of really large items that, you know, you might want to look at individually on their own, I may still have 1 or 2 in there, but again, it starts to get to a different view of the data, and it is kind of something interesting as you see, you know, very little you know, activity or volume until you start getting over 1 million, and boy oh boy does it just rise up dramatically after that. Like, it's almost like unheard of, the hockey stick of that. So again, trying to show you a variety of ways of working with graphs, and, you know, a bit on the fly, but I think that's how it should be. I mean, I think you should be kind of querying your data with some specific reports, like is the item round, or filtering like we were talking about, but you know, from a kind of analytic perspective, you should also be summarizing the data and graphing it in ways that you can just kind of get more different perspectives and changing those perspectives. So, you know, there's a lot of data here we're throwing around. We will be sending you all that sample data so you can play with this. You can kind of see, you know, a lot of the analysis that we did in putting together these graphs. And I do have a full video on developing the scatter. Again, if you do want to kind of watch that beyond what we did today, kind of like a quick analysis of the scatter. And I'm going to include that in there as well, you know, just as another link. I have some other ideas, but I think this scatter one is good because it really kind of gives you a lot of different graph type of improvements and such to look at. Okay, I'm now just going to kind of take a look at sampling, and again, it is something where it is very difficult, you know, to do an entire course on Excel, and you know, do a lot in sampling, and use Excel for sampling, mind you, because Excel isn't really that good from a sampling perspective. I mean, it's not really built, you know, for high-end sampling. And I do find, though, that there are products out there that, you know, I think work quite well. Active Data for Excel, again, is a nice one. I mean, I use ACL for a lot of the sampling I do, I will admit, but just because I've grown comfortable with it. But I do find Active Data for Excel has a lot of the features built in, which we'll talk about, that are of more of a more expensive product, if you will. So what are the steps in our sampling approach? I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but overall you're kind of setting a population. You're determining, are you going to kind of sample on the value of the item or on whether or not it's an attribute, like a yes-no. You're going to pick a sampling method, calculate a sample size, audit the sample, and evaluate that sample. Again, we're not going to get through, you know, all of those things in our section here. Let me just kind of get to this sampling one. Bear with me 1 second. But I do want to kind of quickly go through it. There is attribute sampling, monetary unit sampling, which again is going down to the money unit level. So each dollar actually is another sampling unit. And then there's stratified sample, which I actually like the best. I think that that's kind of the, you know, top way of doing it, or what a lot of people do. It's not as or statistical. It's not statistical, but I think it kind of focuses auditors a little bit better at some of the high dollar and more interesting things. These are just some of the input types, depending on whether or not it's a record sample or a monetary unit sample. The record sample is one that you're obviously, you know, looking for more of an attribute type testing, like does that item, that record, did it get approved, did it get signed off on, did it get filed away properly? There's a confidence level, an upper error limit rate, error rate, record interval, number of errors, all these things that you're putting in. From a monetary unit sample point of view, again, the dollar unit, it becomes the sample, and it like starts randomly in your dollar field, and it just kind of counts down at like this fixed interval, and it picks items that are within that range of dollars, so that's the software, different types. So with that said, let me kind of jump into Excel from a sampling perspective. And I'm going to go back to this trusty file because it seems to be doing doing well for me. And I do have this accounts payable file here. Now, I was really just going to show you an active data very quickly here, rather than trying to explain, what was in my Word document on this. I think it's a lot easier to kind of show active data. Now, active data is something that fits into the ribbon of Excel and allows you to utilize a lot of audit functions that you can utilize. There is the summarize, the duplicates, the top, bottom, aging, stratifying, etc. There is also sampling, as we talked about, and the random sample would be a way, there are ways of actually calculating what it should be based on this expected error and tolerable error. And if you do a lot of sampling, you'll know what all this stuff means, but I don't want to waste a lot of time on it. At the end of the day, though, if I said I want to select 30 items, that's it, random sample, hit the finish button, and go back to Excel, and this is a sample now of 30 items. Should be 31 rows with the header that has now been selected from that payables data. So it's a real simple product to use. I would say from the other sampling approaches, the monetary unit sample gets a little more complex because you're sampling at the dollar amount level. But it really, I think, is in calculating the values. You need materiality, you need an expected misstatement, and again, a lot of factors that is just beyond, kind of going through each one in today. But the product does kind of get ready for it, so you're able to do that. You can also evaluate your samples, especially in this case, the monetary unit sample, where you can put in the variety of kind of differences from a book value and audited value, and it calculates how far off you are, or if you have to kind of add to your sample. So, I do know that there are other data analysis type functions. So there is an add-in to Excel, and it really depends on the different types of Excel you have these days on how you kind of get to it. I may get to it by certain kind of scroll bars that you won't, given that I'm in 2013. So, all I can just bear with me here. And I think from overall at this point, I think what I'd like to do to kind of continue and sort of close out the session, but then open it up for questions, is I feel we've gone through almost every concept that I wanted to get across today. I probably should kind of set a polling question up, but let me, I guess that data analysis item, I will note you have to kind of add it in different ways, but once you have it, it does calculate a random kind of sample for you, and it has a random number generator, which is there, which is great. but and there is some sampling in here as well, but I really would kind of, they're a lot harder to use. And the way I did it is in my Excel, how to use Excel book, the PDF document we'll be sending you, we actually utilized the random number generator to kind of help us out. I will tell you, though, this data analysis pack for while we're here is that the regression toolkit was pretty useful. I actually, if you read enough about a regression, there's enough people that are going to use Excel, and that really, definitely helps kind of carry along the process. So, okay, so with that said, I'm going to kind of go into sort of the last bit here, which is macro development, and kind of getting over a couple of files to you that, hopefully show you the value of macro development. So macros are things, you can go to your view menu usually in every product and go to view macros or record a macro. Now again, I'm going to send you some videos, links on exactly how to, kind of record the macro, and it's already kind of in here. You have the sample files that are part of those videos so that you can actually learn more. Again, I don't want to waste a lot of time on it today because, we only have a limited amount of time, and I don't want to spend too much on macros. But with that said, I mean, there is a way to kind of utilize the record macro feature and add, just items that you'd really like to have as part of your repertoire. So one thing might be to just kind of arrange all of your windows in more of a tiled fashion, and generally what you could do is kind of create a shortcut key, and gosh, maybe I'll do like a Control K for right now, and I'll for this I'll just kind of call it arrange all, just for simplicity's sake. And what I can do is kind of go arranged all tiled like that, and I only had one sheet open, but I can then hit the stop button down below here, and that will stop that macro. So let me open up a couple of other spreadsheets. Hopefully this will work quite well. At least having two open. I don't like that it opened it up in a separate Excel document, but let's see how this goes. I can go arrange all tiled, right? Okay, so that looks pretty good. And what I'll do is I'll kind of get back to what I had, and then I'll hit the Control K, and sure enough, I go back. It actually does exactly what I needed to do. Now that's really useful if you find these functions that are like really far down in the menu structure and you just want to create a little macro for it. That's one way of doing it. There's other ways of kind of adding it into the toolbar up here, but it really depends like what level Excel you're at right now, so I don't want to spend too much time here, but you could add more commands here, so that you have all these commands there. We actually, I think I have a macro here for a tick mark, so if I click on PO number, I don't, bear with me. Yeah, it couldn't find it because I'm on a different computer now, but I generally had a macro workbook that's saved. All of your macros, mind you, the ones that are saved here are generally saved to your personal data kind of workbook. So if you change computers or something, that computer won't have that personal data workbook. Okay, these are just some of the simple kind of macro things you can do. I'm trying to give you just some areas to kind of go to. When we think about some of the macros, let me actually go back to a polling question because we're getting a little over on my polling question time here. And so the launching that poll, what function is used to determine, bear with me one second, sorry. What function is used to determine if a cell is a round number? Is it the offset? Is it mod? Is it mid? Or is it round? So which function is that? Most of you have voted. I will, while I'm here, I like to open up the question window. And I believe there are no questions so far unless I'm missing something here. So that's, you know, I mean, if definitely if people have questions, please let me know. Okay. And from a polling question point of view, I am going to stop that poll because almost everyone has voted, and just give it like 5 more seconds if you could, if you just want to vote, that'd be great. And I'll close that and share that with everyone. So, you know, in essence, the mod function is correct. The round function does more of a decimal place kind of setup versus anything else. So I did want to kind of note that as well. Okay, so you know, some of the things that we sort of talked about in macro use you know, perspective is formatting data. There are other macros that you can set up to adding totals and formulas to columns, setting up tick marks where that normally works where you click on the tick mark and it puts like a green check mark wherever you go. It's a neat little way of kind of, you know, adding tick marks to places or even moving data around. And I find kind of the moving data around, that's some of the videos that I'll show you. I find that really interesting. So but I think it does take some time to kind of execute. Okay, I just wanted to then show you a couple of macros that are, you know, hopefully you'll agree are quite useful. Let me just kind of close every one of my Excels out just so we're kind of set here. And I'm almost positive I have a much better example of this, but let me just kind of set this, bear with me 1 minute here. There we go. So, you know, one of the things that I find a lot of times is I am importing a lot of data files together. And, you know, what an import, you know, when we are kind of importing things is that you will get from a client many times files that look exactly the same. So you'll get like 3 general ledgers and they're all exactly the same, one on top of another. And what I kind of found was sometimes in some cases I was getting 40 or 50 of these things. So I decided to have an add-in built, and you can notice how if you open up this import data files version 2, we're going to have a data file index that explains each one of you that comes with the data files, so you'll see how it fits in. But when you click on the add-ins, there's an import file feature. And the import file feature will kind of ask you where excuse me, to go in your data, and then you just kind of select, you know, on your hard drive where you want to go, and we're just going to select that folder. Now what it's doing is it opened up those 3 different Excel spreadsheets, and the first thing it does is it combines all the data files together. So it's going to do this for you, right? It puts one on top of another. The second thing it does is it summarizes, whoops, oh no, sorry, my Excel is just having a little bit of an issue. Bear with me 1 second. Well, I apologize again. My Excel just seems to be slowing down as we're getting into the end of the day or something. Bear with me. See if I can. Okay. It just seems to be thinking a little bit too much, and I'm sorry. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay. And it is definitely not liking that. Well, you know, let me just save that to. I'll save it to the crypt for right now, and we can go into the crypt. See if this thing works. Let me open up this. what is really great about this, and it really should be working for you, I think I'm just having kind of an end-of-day data glitch with Excel here. It not only creates a summary by telling you the actual sheets of data, and mind you, if there are multiple sheets, so the tabs down below here, if there are like 10 tabs, it actually adds up the 10 tabs and puts them all in here and tells you them all. Gives you the starting, the number of records, it tells you the name of that particular sheet, where it put it to, which is the data sheet. And what I really liked about it is it gives you kind of the field column, like what is the largest length of an item in each one of these fields. And then it also kind of adds on, or not adds on, it tells you like in one of the data imports that we got, we actually had a fiscal year field, but we didn't have it in the other tables. So this import script, it really should work for you. I just think I'm having a end-of-day Excel thing. What it does is it pulls together these files, and it could be lots of files. Another thing I wanted to note is, let's say you had 2 million records, right? And what it will do is it'll actually spread the data to 2 spreadsheets. So if you have Excel 2007 or 10 and you've gone up to 1 million records, this thing will actually kind of copy and paste it. And I'm showing you this to say this is what's possible, that you really can do a lot with macros. And I did not design this. I mean, this is definitely Mr. Excel and Bill Jelen and Tracy who concoct these idea. I come up with the idea and then they kind of build it for me. But definitely very, very useful. Okay, the other one that I wanted to show you, and let's try to get this one open for you as well. Bear with me one second here, is the directory list creator. And I'm just going to kind of point it at this folder just to kind of keep it simple. But what this will do is you go to your add-in menu, create directory listing. You do have to kind of pick where to go. You can actually select, if you want to select your entire hard drive. I'm not going to do this right now, but you can select your hard drive. Of course, I have such trouble finding anything these days in these in Windows. Sort of, bear with me 1 minute here. Maybe my library is here. Yep. I'm almost there, folks. Hold on. There we go. And I probably could actually start with all of my AuditNet stuff for fun, and just kind of click on AuditNet, the entire folder. I don't know if you can see this or not, but there was a scrolling kind of ticker down below, and it counted up probably about 700 files that are in those folders. Now, if you're a fraud examiner, and you get a computer, and I don't want to tell you to do this, meaning there's a lot of things around computers that you get, and it's evidence, and you need to be really careful with them. So, bear it with a grain of salt. But if you do get a computer and you want to search it, this is a great product for searching it. I mean, it not only gives you the file path of everything, the file name, the type, the file size, date created, date modified, time modified. I wanted to look for times where people are working really late, or really early. Like I'm ending work at 5:04 p.m. and well, I guess a lot of these are starting at 11 something. I think if I looked in here, I think these are 4:33 p.m. Anyway, there's probably ways of better sorting this. I will tell you the time modified, but it does a nice job of kind of giving you a lot of info. What I use this for is in my backing up of data and also in my cleaning up of my hard drive. I will run this on my entire hard drive, and then I'll filter on file size to say, what is the kind of largest item in here? What's the smallest item in here? And have the thing, basically kind of, jump around depending on anything. By the way, if you want to get crazy and if even from a fraud perspective, if you're taking a look at data, there's really no reason why you can't pivot table this data just like you can't pivot table all the other stuff. If for some reason that didn't show up, I must not have set my pivot range properly there. That seemed to work pretty nicely. There we go. Basically you can kind of set up the date created, kind of take a look at maybe grouping that date. I'm working really fast, so because hopefully you folks have seen this enough from me today, and taking a look at maybe month and years. And kind of quickly looking at how many files do I have. I guess we were kind of ramping up a lot of stuff on the folders of data that I have here with AuditNet, where 2013 and 14 is where I'm spending a lot of my time. And yeah, like March is now, we spend a lot of time there planning and getting a lot of stuff done. So I mean, it even gives you a perspective of your work, if that can help you in some way, by kind of looking at when you're creating some of these files and such. So wanted to show you those two macros. They will be provided. Wanted to kind of show you the value, more so I think of macros than anything else. I do need to note to you before we get to our polling questions, if you ever have a problem with a macro, the Alt F11 key will kind of get you to a macro editor screen, which a couple of videos that I'm going to send you, and I keep kind of mentioning here on this topic, will definitely expand on this directory list creation tool. But at this point, the Alt F11 does that. What we'll do is I will kind of launch the final poll, and we'll take a look at questions as we do it. So what is the set of keys that you're going to select in order to get your Visual Basic editor for the macro to show up? Is it Alt or Control X, Control Z, Control F9, or Alt F11? While that's going on, I'm just going to go to my questions and just see if anything's come in. This is a great time. If anyone does have questions, please, feel free to throw them in here. I do see a few showing up at the top. And we may have missed a polling question. I do apologize. I lost track of time a little bit there in working with some of the files. I saw that was one of the questions. And okay. And we do have some videos on talking about how to sample with just Excel. And I think someone had said they may have an issue in putting the add in due to the IT policy, which is fine. But it's definitely take a look at that. I mean, it should be a pretty benign kind of install for you. But again, I think if everyone can kind of close out the poll, we'll get that closed. And we'll share that with everyone. Alt F11 is correct, and thank you for answering as such. So, at this point, we're kind of towards the end of the broadcast, and opening it up for any sort of questions that may be of interest or value to you. While I'm kind of looking at the questions itself, which we are getting to. Let me just kind of close down a few things here, clean up a little bit, and get back to our presentation just for a second here. Oops. So we're going to, as we noted, there are the added bonuses, of course, the files used in the class, the using Excel, the active data link, and especially those macro tools that we're adding as well towards the end there. I did see one question to come through, a couple of questions. One of them.
Rich, there is one polling question left.
Oh yeah, do you want to roll through that? Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know if you missed polling question number 4.
Yeah, I think I ended up going back to it. We're missing number 6 right now.
Right.
And so yeah, we can launch that. So just launching the final one. That would be, what does a scatter graph display? Value only, volume only, time distribution, or value and volume? And we did get a question on the scatter graph. Let me just try to sort that from high to low. Yep, you will be getting a recording. I think Jim answered that one. There's hopefully the polling questions we did see there, and thank you for answering all of those. That was more my fault of not doing all of them till now. But we'll keep that open for just another like 20 seconds or so. We're almost everybody's voted there, so thank you. To get the files, if anyone desperately wants the files within, we'll try to get it to you in 2 or 3 days. But if you desperately need it, do send me an email, and I will try to get you, for the most part, the video files as a link. I do have them on a website, so it should be something that you should be able to grab. But we like to kind of put it in the email that has the CPE certificate and everything else put together. But again, if you have a separate need, feel free. I'd be happy to send that to you. So another question came in around the video itself and will it be condensed, and so just kind of I'll maybe jump to a slide here just for at this point is audit software videos is something that you can currently sign up for free, and you can get quite a bit of training for free. Is about 70 hours of videos, and I'm going to highlight a bunch of them for you. In that, the 70 hours cuts across products like IDEA, ACL, Excel, Active Data for Excel, like it's everything, so you can, kind of browse around and learn quite a bit. It is not only a lot more organized than the live events, because the live events have their live nature to them, but what's nice about them is we have a lot of call-outs and Zooms and things of that nature that we really put into it. For that, for the most part, we feel free to sign up for audit software videos if you haven't already. Many of you probably do have subscriptions. I know a lot of the names when I see you coming up, so I think you've come before. There are sample data files for purchase related to the videos, but the videos themselves give you quite a bit. So definitely take a look at them. We try to kind of parse it down to 3 to 10, maybe some of them are like 15-minute videos, but it's all kind of parsed down to very topical, organized sections. And I guess now, a couple of things. One question came in on duplicates, and I'm happy to kind of jump to that and just quickly show you something. If I can open up quickly here the payables data and looking for duplicates. Now, there are a lot of if statements that you could, issue for duplicates, but one of the things that you could do is also just kind of highlight in most of the versions of Excel. I mean, I believe even 2007 will allow this, but definitely 2007 allows this. You can highlight, say, the invoice number column, for example, go to conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, and go duplicate values. And that will give you kind of a quick duplicate test. If you, I do find removing duplicates to be a value, especially like in the vendor master file, in accounts payable, especially if you're looking for duplicate payments as well. So let me kind of go back here. Sorry about that. I guess thank you for posting that we're still on the polling question there. There we go. And what I've done here for those of you that basically from the home menu, just clicking on home ribbon, you can basically highlight any column and look for duplicates. So you can go conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, duplicates. There's a lot of other things you could do, mind you, but duplicate is one of them. And what that'll do is highlight all the duplicates, which you can clearly see here. Now, if you really want to do a combo duplicate, you could add columns. But anyway, I think I just wanted to kind of show you that because I saw that pop up on the screen and thought that might be useful. Everyone should be seeing the screen at this point. I tried to keep the audience view up to date. I will now kind of head over just to some of the final slides. For the most part, we have a couple of things in the queue. We have getting started using ACL in your next audit, which are more ACL type training, May 1st, and using ACL scripting in your next audit, which again is May 1st. Excel pivot tables and graphing for auditors, which will take the concepts that we talked about today and go a lot deeper. And I want to use a lot of more advanced examples. So, it's almost like what we learned today was kind of primer for that pivot tables and graphing for auditors. And ultimately building simple continuous monitoring in ACL, which is much more of a, kind of a how-to within that product and getting reports running on a more consistent basis. Now, these are all webinars that have CPE attached to them, whereas audit software videos there's no CPE attached to this. This is more of like a YouTube associated with, data analytics and Excel and that type of work. All of the documents that we're talking about today are going to be provided to you as examples for practice, so you will be able to have that for questions that came in. And yeah, for the most part, I think we've answered every question, and I didn't know if you had any closing words, Jim.
Rich?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't. I see another question there in terms of Excel spreadsheet available for use as practice.
I just answered that. Yes, okay. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. We're good on that one.
And I think we didn't answer the last polling question, but I think that the majority did have the answer. I'll just show that poll really quickly.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
I think everyone answered it.
Value and volume.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for going through that, Jim. Yep, agreed.
No, I don't have anything else. So, I would like to thank you, Rich, for putting on this presentation today and sharing all of your knowledge. And Rich really is a great resource for all of you out there that have attended today's webinar. And I want to thank everyone for the great questions that they ask. It's always encouraging when we see a lot of feedback and a lot of questions and good information. And as Rich said, he will be sending the link to the recording. We will try to include that in the follow-up email that we send out, as well as Rich will be contacting you for the data files that you will be receiving. So if there are no other questions, I want to wish everybody a great day, and the same to you, Rich.
Great. Thanks again, everyone.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye.